Right. You're thinking that it's going to have an impact on your country in a way that
A reflection upon yourself?
yeah. Well, my country, myself, right? Part of loyalty means identifying, and also worried about, the standing of your country with other countries, and fear. Haid doesn't emphasize this, but it really is there. In-group loyalty tends to go along with out-group antipathy. In-group when you tend to like your people more, that means you also tend to dislike the others more. And that includes fear and hatred. Yeah.
But you can like something, or a group of people, or whatever the situation is, but you don't have to agree with them.
You don't have to agree with them?
You still like them. That does not mean that you have to dislike or show disrespect or anything like that.
Right.
You still dislike what they're doing.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to reflect on how you feel about the person or the country. I mean, I dislike a lot of things that different politicians have done, but in the long run, I'm certainly happy I'm where I'm at in comparison to being anywhere else in the world. So I don't have to agree with everything in order to still respect or have some loyalty.
Interestingly, because we're talking about emotions here, rather than thought-out political viewpoints, worries about contradictions or whether you're allowed to do one thing and at the same time do another don't really apply here, right? All that we are worried about right now is an instinctive response. Which time do I have? Okay, right? And so if you've got a loyalty instinct, you've got a loyalty instinct no matter what you think of policies, that sort of thing. Okay. The last one that we need to talk about is fairness and reciprocity. I think there's pretty solid evidence that people come naturally with a sense of, with some of the senses you need to cooperate with others, including people who aren't your immediate kin, right? And this includes, the idea that if someone does something for you, you should do something for them. It's a very powerful instinct. There's an anecdote. Back when there was severe famine in Ethiopia, the Ethiopian government donated hurricane relief money to a Central American nation that had suffered a hurricane. And you think, well, God, if you are, if you are suffering one of the biggest famines of the decade, why are you giving money to other people? Well, they felt they owed it because the Central American nation had helped them out previously. I mean, there is a profound instinct towards reciprocity. And so that also is a part of the normal emotional makeup of a human being. Yeah?
Why can't some people just accept what you do for them and let it go at that? Or pass it on to somebody else? Why do they have to continually, or they question your motives?
Right.
One or the other.
Right. Of course. And according to Haid, it's instinctive. And you ask, well, why can't you just do this? Because it seems like something you could logically do. Just accept my charity and don't feel indebted. Logically, it seems possible. Emotionally, it's not. Because these mechanisms, these instincts are very automatic, right? And so questioning your motives is actually a way of deadening your own emotion. Questioning the other person's motives is a way of deadening your own emotion of gratitude and the urge to reciprocate, right? Well, because if the other person's just manipulating you, then you can feel okay with avoiding, with not paying them back, right? The constraints are all emotional; they're not rational. All right, I want to get to one other one other important point here that is actually, I think, the thing that has made Haid's research popular in the media and in larger circles, which is outside of psychiatry, which is that he thinks that differences in people's emotional morality reflect on political differences in the country right now. In particular, he claims that liberals in America have strong attachments to the harm, care, and fairness, reciprocity emotions, but are less moved by things like loyalty, authority, and purity, right? So liberals are less inclined to stand by their country in a time of war because this doesn't register with them as a moral emotion the way that harm does, including especially harm to people overseas, right? Haid's main focus actually is on the debate over gay marriage. And there's a reason why he looks at that very intensely. It's a moment where emotions are high and communication is poor. According to Haid, for conservatives, the idea of gay sex activates the purity emotions. It seems impure, gross, like someone urinating on stage, right? And because it activates those emotions, it is perceived as immoral. Now, liberals can share this emotional response, but they don't think of it as a moral response. It's merely an emotional response. It only counts as moral if it relates to harm or fairness. And as a result, in a gay marriage debate, the liberal is going to feel the fairness emotion, going to feel a desire for marriage equality, for fairness under the law, and see that as morally compelling. Whereas any feelings of grossness at sexual practices they don't understand are set aside as being prejudice, as being irrational. It's interesting, everything here is technically irrational. This is all emotional. But for the liberal, these emotions here are distinctly irrational, whereas these emotions are distinctly moral. Haid actually goes further in the essay that I had you guys read online, and which you really should read. And he says that these emotions, when they develop into societies, develop natural groupings, right? Haid calls his model of morality a social intuitionist model. That is, part of morality is bound up in emotional intuitions, but another part of it is bound up in social interaction. And when emotions interact socially, they evolve into ethical communities. So that's why I've got up here, the instinct becomes, through social interaction, becomes an ethic. And you get different kinds of ethics depending on what emotions dominate. Okay. If you take the liberal perspective where emotions of harm, care, and fairness, reciprocity dominate, you wind up with what Haid terms the ethic of autonomy. It is an ethic that sees the world as made up of individuals with rights. And the job of morality is to protect the rights of individuals. Right? On the other hand, if your focus is on groups and authority and loyalty, you wind up with an advertisement. Now, what is this? you wind up with what Haid calls the ethic of community, which means that the world is made up of groups and institutions, and morality is about the integrity of the institution and playing a role in your institution. The Confucian ethic that Mencius believed in was very much an ethic of community. It was about the emperor being the emperor, and the magistrate being the magistrate, and the son being the son. Everyone plays a role in the community in order to protect the integrity of the community. I got 6 minutes. The religious ethic, according to Haid, comes out of the purity and sanctity emotions. So the world is about, the world is ultimately not about individuals or institutions, it's about God. And the job of morality is to protect the sanctity of the divine. And so this is actually why religious rules tend to focus on food and sex. And this might be more obvious to you if you come from an Islamic or Jewish background than a Christian background, where there are fewer food rules. But for most religions, food rules are really important. They're just as important as sex rules, right? But all of these get bound up in religion because, according to Haid, the instincts that create religion are all about purity. Okay. So I want to, in the brief time remaining, show you one more slide which explains the relationship between emotion and society for Haid, because it is a social interactionist model, and this is an important thing to look at. You begin with an eliciting situation, something that will strike a moral chord. For instance, someone urinating on stage. This strikes a note of disgust. So you have an intuition. An individual A will have an intuition, a feeling of disgust. And that leads to a judgment. This performance is disgusting. This should be banned, right? People all the time will try and ban pornography or things that they feel are disgusting, right? So you then have a judgment. Well, once you make the judgment, it becomes public. You start telling other people about your judgment, and that affects other people's intuitions, which in turn affects their judgments, which in turn affects their intuitions. A feedback of judgment and intuition between individuals. On the outermost periphery of this, according to Haid, is rationality. The ability to actually justify verbally what you're doing. People first make a judgment, and then they try and reason. They come up with reasons for that judgment. And the reasons can reinforce their ability to influence others, right? So if I simply say that's disgusting, I might affect your intuitions a little. But if I say that's disgusting and here's a good reason why it's disgusting, I will affect your intuitions more. Furthermore, if I'm really lucky, I can use my own reasoning to affect my own behavior. That is, using rationality, I can diminish my own intuitions. This is exactly the process that Haid sees liberals engaged in when they diminish instincts of loyalty, purity, and authority, right? You might have an instinctive judgment against gay sex, but then when you reason about it, you think, well, there's no harm here, there's no injustice here, and so I'm going to diminish my intuitions rationally. And so feedback loop, individual